For nearly 10 years, the mere thought of discussing the specifics of my encounter with death and the afterlife would cause me to sob uncontrollably. I'm not sure why, because the experience was amazing and enlightening. Perhaps it was the intensity of love and enlightenment. There are no words to adequately describe it. Since then, I've noticed heightened sensations as well as increased intuitive and psychic abilities. Even though I try to dismiss it as insignificant, something within me refuses to let go. It is now my turn to share my experience. Remember that I am not a writer or a professor, but simply a person with a few pages from my soul's lifebook. When a woman knows something is seriously wrong with her health, but doctor after doctor tells her,
"It's all in your head. You're just getting older,"
she's at a loss for words. She would probably give up if it weren't for the love of her family. This was certainly true for me. I knew I was getting worse and that if someone didn't find the cause soon, I'd die. In my case, I'm not sure if the doctors couldn't see past my trauma or if women are more complex than men and can't be diagnosed as easily. All I knew was that I was dying in a senseless and unnecessary manner, and no one was doing anything about it. To them, I represented physical health that had been depleted by post-traumatic stress. I had a feeling there was more to it. I promised myself that I would see one more doctor. That's all. If she found nothing wrong with me, I would give up my fight for life. It was difficult to have to wait a few months for the appointment. A few months here, there, and everywhere accumulated to years. In my case, 5 years. It would take 5 years to figure out what was wrong with me. Unbelievable. Nonetheless, the daily turmoil of life continued around me. Beginning at the end of 1989, I fought with every ounce of strength I had to sell our home and relocate to the family farm that we had purchased. My father-in-law desired that we repair the farm and make him proud. We suffered a major setback in 1990 when the farmhouse burned to the ground after we had remodeled it with our life savings. We only had the clothes we were wearing and those in the hamper at the empty house we were selling. Then in 1992, we lost my father-in-law, and we began to uncover the truth about my mother-in-law. With all the stress I endured during those 5 years, it was sheer determination that kept me alive. During the March 1994 appointment, the female doctor performed a thorough examination and concluded that everything appeared to be in order. I was told to expect a call from her office once the results of the routine pap smear were in. My family and I went ahead with our planned trip to Colorado because I had regular pap smears and was told yet again that I was in perfect health. I got weaker and weaker in Colorado. I could feel my strength leaving my body. I barely managed to keep a smile on my face all weekend. Our answering machine was full of messages from the doctor's office when we got home. Each message left was clear in its urgency. I was told to come in right away when I called the office. The doctor informed me that the pap smear indicated that I required additional testing. I was assured that even if I had cervical cancer, a cone biopsy could easily cure it. However, after additional tests and the cone biopsy, she stated that the cancer was already advanced and had spread to my outer tissues and lymph nodes. She initially tried to chastise me for not having regular exams, which would have detected this cancer earlier and allowed for minor procedures to cure it. She calmed down after I reminded her that I had gone to doctor after doctor and had pap smear after pap smear after pap smear. I could tell she felt the cancer should never have progressed to this point. I concurred with her. The doctor informed me that I required immediate and life-saving surgery. She stated that I would have a radical hysterectomy and the affected lymph nodes removed. She would be assisted by another doctor because she had never removed lymph nodes. If I survived, my lower body would swell until it could no longer swell after the lymph nodes were removed. The pain from the swollen and tight skin could become unbearable. The pre-surgery testing and surgery were scheduled for the following week before I even left the doctor's office. Friends urged me to seek a second opinion, so I contacted a New York hospital that had been recommended. They scheduled an emergency appointment for me after I provided my background information and diagnosis. I was basically told the same thing at the appointment. Surgery was required immediately. I was told that I needed a radical hysterectomy, which would remove my uterus, cervix, and a large portion of my vagina. I wouldn't know if my ovaries were removed or not until after the surgery. That option was contingent on how everything looked during the procedure. Lymph nodes from hip to hip and up under the rib cage would be removed and tested to determine the extent of the cancer spread. I couldn't believe what was going on. I didn't have time to ponder. Part of me was relieved that after years of going to doctor, someone had finally discovered that I was seriously ill. Another part of me wanted to cry as I remembered all the cruel things those doctors said to me over the years.
"It's all in your head,"
was the most common remark.
"You women make me sick."
said another.
You're all terrified of growing older. It's just a change in your hormones.
They're completely off base. But it didn't matter what I said. The doctor who made me feel the worst sat engrossed, using a ruler and different colored markers to draw lines on my chart. When I tried to explain that I was there because I had our strong feeling something was seriously wrong with me, he abruptly cut me off and said,
Did I tell you to speak? You will speak only when I direct you to do so.
When I started to say, but he cut me off, pointed his finger at my face and rudely said,
I didn't tell you to speak.
I was so depressed that I almost gave up trying to figure out what was wrong with me. I knew something was killing my body during those 5 years of being told over and over that there was nothing wrong with me except stress. I felt it so strongly that I started watching women in stores to see if I could find someone who could finish raising my son and be a good wife to my husband after I died. My heart ached at the prospect of not being able to be with them indefinitely. It was terrifying to realize I'd been correct all along. To think that I only had a few days to prepare myself and my family for the possibility that I would die from a cancer that could and should have been detected earlier. I was numb but not afraid. It was difficult to maintain my faithful smile as I purchased Easter gifts for my 12-year-old son before my scheduled surgery. I didn't know if I'd ever get another chance to do it. It broke my heart to think that I wouldn't be there Easter morning to see his face light up as he opened his presents and searched for all the plastic eggs filled with money. I wasn't sure if the adorable little green suit and multicolored tie I bought him for Easter would be his Easter suite or the one he'd wear to my funeral. With little time to think, I was persuaded to have the surgery in New York. The day of surgery arrived far too quickly. I undressed and changed into the hideous hospital gowns. My father and husband then waited nervously with me until I was taken to surgery. My lips quivered and my eyes welled up with tears as I told them, possibly for the last time, how much I loved them. I had no idea if I'd ever see them again. When I awoke and realized I had survived the surgery, I looked up at the ceiling, closed my eyes and said, "Thank you, Lord," under my breath. Then I started feeling tugging from the tubes that seemed to be sticking out everywhere from me. They were in my nose, neck, spine, 2 on each side of my abdomen and my hand. And, of course, I had the dreaded pee bag. After a few days, the lymph node testing revealed that 1 out of every 3 nodes was cancerous, and radiation treatment was strongly recommended. On a lighter note, I discovered that I had developed irritating allergies. One was to the orange solution that they used to sterilize my stomach and vagina in the operating room. The other was made of simple plastic tape that wrapped around my spine and around my neck. It literally ripped my skin off. Furthermore, the morphine started giving me terrible headaches, so it was discontinued. The 2 drain tubes that were placed on each side of my abdomen were not stitched tightly enough during the surgery, according to the doctors. This caused my body fluid to leak out around the tubes rather than into them. The fluid escaped so quickly that they had to wrap large, thick pads around the tubes. What kind of tape did they use? Yes, plastic tape that removed even more skin from my body. I was covered in bright red patches of raw skin. The pads needed to be changed so frequently that the nurses told me to do it myself. I guess I didn't mind having to put them on myself after watching the one nurse drop an open gauze pad on the sticky floor, bend down and pick it up, and then attempt to put it on my open wounds before I stopped her. So I reasoned. I got up the next day and awkwardly pushed the equipment that held my IVs and monitors down the hall for my daily exercise. On my way back to my room, I noticed that the pads taped around the drain tubes in my abdomen were completely saturated from all the fluid leaking from my body. The fluid started pouring down my legs and I couldn't stop it. I returned to my room, climbed into bed, and attempted to change the pads while wearing my wet hospital gown, but I was too weak. The fluid continued to soak my blanket and sheets while I waited for my strength to return. I was feeling weaker, so I dialed 911 for a nurse. I waited patiently for a nurse to bring in a dry hospital gown, sheets, and blanket to replace the soaked ones I was wearing. I became increasingly cold as I waited. My body began to tremble as a result of the chills. Something wasn't right as the body fluid continued to leak out around the 2 tubes. My teeth were chattering because I was so cold. I buzzed the nurse again after about an hour.
"I'll get there when I get there,"
the nurse said curtly. After about an hour and a half, the door to my room opened and in walked a nurse. She didn't even look to see if there was anything wrong before hurling the hospital gown, sheets, and blanket onto my face and chest.
"I don't have time for this,"
the nurse said as she turned away to rush out. My husband is causing me problems. Something strange clicked in my body when the linens landed on me. I started gasping for air but couldn't breathe. My body was too weak to raise my hand to remove the linens from my face. My chilled, shaken body experienced a tingling sensation. The tingling became so loud that it drowned out all of the hospital sounds. I had a feeling I was going to die. My final thought was that I had missed the opportunity to say goodbye to my son, husband, and family. Then there was silence. Then I was briefly above the bed looking down. My thoughts were abruptly diverted just as I realized that was my lifeless body in the bed below. I was suddenly dragged into complete darkness. I smelled an indescribable odor in the total darkness. My fluid-soaked body felt coolness in the air around the same time. I recall wishing that I had a coat to keep me warm. Then I started to feel myself rising. As I was being dragged upward, I began to feel as if I were in a tunnel, a never-ending pitch, black tunnel. My speed of ascent increased, becoming faster and faster. It appeared to be faster than anything imaginable or possible. Puffs of clouds brushed across my eyelids and cheeks as I continued to speed upwards through the seemingly endless darkness. It felt refreshing, like cool dew. That's when my gaze was drawn upward. There was a magnificent, wondrous light there, white and pure. It appeared to be a long distance away at first. One look at this brilliant light made me feel safe, loved, and peaceful. I didn't feel any pain or sadness, just an overwhelming, peaceful love that grew stronger as I got closer. This white light was extremely bright. It was nearly blinding. I found myself squinting just to look at it. I took a quick glance away from the light because it seemed intense enough to burn right through my eyes, but it didn't. Perhaps the cool mist on my face helped in some way. When I looked away, all I saw was the vast blackness around and beneath me, so I returned my gaze to the light and never looked down again. The sense of tranquil love grew stronger as I watched the light get closer and brighter. I was suddenly no longer accelerating upwards. While I continued to squint due to the extreme brightness of the light, my eyes began to adjust. I began to notice thick white puffs of cloud moving around. A gentle breeze from the moving clouds blew the lightweight, long, flowing garment I was wearing. As I began to walk slowly through the clouds, I noticed that I was barefoot. I was gazing at this magnificent gate that was gloriously gleaming before I knew it. I just stood there in awe of its beauty. Prismalite rays were bouncing off the exquisite gems in all directions. It was absolutely breathtaking. Because I had always wished for a driveway gate on the farm, I became engrossed in trying to recall every amazing detail about it. As I got closer, I noticed how pearly gems sparkled brilliantly in the light. Beyond the gates, a remarkable peace drew me in. I was so secure that fear never entered my mind. I tried squinting really hard to see through the beaming light and constantly moving clouds, but I couldn't. Then I noticed something in the near distance to the right, so I squinted even harder. The clouds parted just enough to reveal the shadows of two people. It appeared to be a man with a woman by his side. I didn't know them, but I had the impression they were waiting for me for a reason. The clouds thickened and closed in around the couple just as they were about to thin out enough for me to see clearly. All I could see in the light were the clouds passing by. I was wondering why the clouds had thickened so quickly just as I was about to see who was there. At the same time, I became aware of someone standing directly in front of me. The clouds also thickened around that shadow, making it impossible for me to see him. There are no words to describe the overwhelming love I felt as I stood there in front of him. No one could have imagined a more powerful love. It hit me at that precise moment. I was in heaven before our Lord. I had the impression that he knew every detail of my soul as I stood before him. I felt stupid for not realizing until that moment that the gates I had passed through were the pearly gates. For a split second, my gaze shifted away from the screen and down to my right. I couldn't tell if it was because the light was so bright or because I felt unworthy of such wondrous love. "Fear not, for thou art worthy of my love," he said, as if he could hear my thoughts. My throat tightened and my eyes welled up with tears as I heard those words. "Are you sure?" I wondered. Each question was followed by an answer and reassurance. My entire life seemed to be reviewed and clarified in an instant. If I had to pick just one word to describe our Lord, it would have to be love, undeniable love. I'm not sure how to put it. I couldn't see him because of the clouds and light, but I could feel his love. He was directly in front of me, so close. I heard incredible love, power, and peace in his voice, but I'm not sure if he spoke. We felt, heard, and responded to each other without saying anything. I was told that I had to return, that I wasn't supposed to die when I did, and that I had more work to do. I was also told that I needed to protect my husband and son from someone. It got dark just as I was about to ask another question. I realized I was back in the hospital bed while gasping for air. When my right arm reached up to remove the blanket, sheets, and hospital gowns from my face, it had the strength to do so. I could take a breath. I started hearing hospital noises and feeling pain again. My body shivered and my teeth chattered uncontrollably. My body was once again extremely weak. My hospital gown and bed linens remained wet. I was a little sad to be back. There was no pain when I was in heaven. My body was not completely mutilated. I didn't have any tubes attached to me. I was complete. I was complete. I was tough. I was more loved than anyone could have imagined. I meekly nodded, as if to say I understood, as I looked up to the heavens. Then I shut my eyes. The nurse eventually arrived. She walked over to my bed and said casually,
You're right. You've been soaked.
He went to change my hospital gown, but noticed that the linens she had brought in and thrown on me earlier were also wet, so she went to get more. She told me about her bad day and the problems she was having with her husband as she was putting a dry hospital gown on me. I was only half listening to her as she rambled on, because I was remembering how I died as a result of her bad day. I don't think I said anything while she was there. I had 1,000 thoughts about my glorious time in heaven racing through my mind. Not only did my struggle for life resume with the numerous medical complications that followed, particularly the radiation therapy, but my ability to occasionally sense the presences or spirits of those who had previously died began to spark inside me. I can't get a feeling out of my head no matter how hard I try. It completely overpowers all of my thoughts. I can't even fall asleep. My mind does not shut down, but it is completely exhausted. Each of these experiences has a significant impact on me. I haven't been able to tell anyone about it. Who'd believe me? For example, who would believe that I had a vividly clear vision of horrifying hell as I shook an attorney's hand? That I felt a mournful presence in a friend's cottage that wouldn't let me leave until I helped her? That while driving past New York City, I sensed an enormous death toll in store for the city weeks before the terror attack? That when I awoke on Sept 11th, I knew that was the day that I discovered the identity of the couple from heaven. My feelings are about small and big things, people close to me and those I only know through friends. Hearing, seeing, or touching a person or their belongings can cause these inexplicable moments. This intense emotional experience has unquestionably altered my life. I'm no longer afraid of death now that I've seen a glimpse of the amazing realm that awaits me beyond. As I stated at the outset of my story, I am not a writer, but I hope that my words touch the hearts of those in search of hope, comfort, or purpose.